Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a story that isn't about a spotless record or dominant championships. Instead, we're exploring ambition, profound isolation, and a horse that kind of forces us to rethink what success even means in global racing. We're talking about the 1985 Japanese Derby winner, Sirius Symboli. Now, his story features 0 overseas wins, which sounds like failure, right? But we're going to unpack why his career, despite that, is actually one of the most important in modern Japanese racing history. It's about courage, about being a pioneer, more than just wins and losses.
Exactly. And you really have to understand where he came from. Sirius Symboli was born into, well, racing royalty, the Symboli dynasty. This is the same farm that gave Japan's Symboli Rudolf, the Triple Crown winner. So expectations were huge. He was talented, this dark bay colt, had plenty of stamina, but his defining feature, his personality, he was stubborn, independent, almost defiant, did things his own way.
And that personality, that stubborn streak, it starts causing ripples even before his biggest win, the Derby. Looking back at the lead up to that 1985 race, it's just full of conflict, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He was with Nihonyanagi stable, ridden mostly by Kazuhiro Kato, a good jockey, showing promise, but maybe not the star power the owner wanted.
Right. The results were okay, but not quite hitting that top tier consistently. And the owner, Mr. Wada, he had ideas.
He did. Mr. Wada basically demanded that the top jockey at the time, Yuki Okabe, take over the ride from Kato. He wanted that star power.
But the trainer refused.
Flat out refused. He believed in Kato, in the consistency they'd built up, especially with a horse as, let's say, particular as Sirius Symboli. It was a real standoff.
And this wasn't just some behind-the-scenes stable gossip either. Our sources show this blew up, actually made the newspapers. There was talk of the horse being forcibly moved stables, a proper scandal brewing.
It really highlighted that tension. Owner's ambition versus the trainer's connection with the horse. Was it about winning or about fame? There was a compromise eventually. Okabe did ride him once in the Wakaba Stakes.
And won, right. Which must have felt like vindication for the owner.
For sure. But the team, the trainer and Kato, they held firm for the big one.
So for the Japanese Derby, the absolute peak for a 3-year-old in Japan.
They put Kato back on. It was a statement.
And the race itself, the conditions were something else.
Oh, completely dramatic. First, the favorite, Miho Shinzan, had to pull out. Injury.
Okay. Opens the field up.
Right. Then race day at Tokyo Racecourse. The heavens opened. Just a total downpour.
Turning the track into
a swamp. Thick, heavy mud. The kind of going that tests heart and stamina above all else.
And for a horse like Sirius Symboli.
He seemed to almost relish it. That stubbornness, that power. He just plowed through the mud while others struggled.
So under Kato, the jockey they almost lost the ride on.
He surges clear and wins the Japanese Derby. It was, well, poetic justice, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Vindication for Kato, the trainer, and this difficult horse. They'd stood their ground against the owner and won Japan's biggest race. So you conquer Japan. What next? Usually is the autumn classics at home.
Not this time. This is where the story takes a really sharp turn. They immediately aimed for Europe. France, specifically. The original idea was actually for him to go with his superstar stablemate, Symboli Rudolf. A sort of two-pronged attack.
Makes sense. Strength in numbers, but
Rudolf developed leg trouble. Couldn't travel.
So Sirius Symboli.
Completely alone. No stablemate. No established Japanese support crew traveling with him. Just sent.
Okay, hold on. We call this pioneering, but was it maybe just ill-prepared? Sending a horse into that environment solo seems incredibly risky.
It was absolutely ambitious. Maybe bordering on reckless ambition in hindsight.
Yeah.
The execution. Well, that's where the pioneering comes in, because it showed everyone what not to do. Think about the logistics. He stayed overseas for 2 full years, 1985 to 1987.
2 years. That's extraordinary.
It is. Total isolation. No dedicated Japanese vet, no farrier who knew him, constantly bouncing between local European trainers who barely knew the horse.
Compared to how they do it now, like when Deep Impact or Orfevre went over?
Worlds apart. Those are like military operations. Huge support teams, dedicated facilities, everything planned meticulously.
Decades of learning built on experiences like this one.
Exactly. People talk about El Condor Pasa's 1-year campaign in the late 90s as being incredibly daring, and it was. But Sirius Symboli did twice that, a decade earlier, with a tiny fraction of the support. It wasn't really an expedition. Our sources rightly call it an exile.
Dropped into a foreign system, expected to compete at the highest level.
Against Europe's best on their home turf.
And the results? Well, the raw statistics tell a tough story. 14 races across those 2 years.
And 0 wins. That's the headline number.
Yeah. His most noted performance internationally is probably finishing way back in the 1986 arc, the one Dancing Brave won famously. Just looking at the results sheet, it looks like failure.
It does. But this is where you have to shift your thinking, right? Forget winning. Think surviving. The numbers look bad, but staying competitive at all under those conditions, that was the achievement. He was fighting the system as much as the horses.
Language barriers, different training methods, feed changes.
Everything. He was constantly adapting. And yet, look a bit closer at those 14 starts. He wasn't just making up the numbers. He ran second in the Prix, a key Group 3 arc prep race. That shows genuine class.
Okay, second in a G3 is respectable.
More than respectable. And then, even better, he finished third in the Prix Royal Oak. That's a Group 1. Right. A major championship for stayers in Europe.
Third in a European Group 1, while basically operating solo for 2 years.
It's astonishing, really. It tells you the engine, the raw talent was absolutely there. He just didn't have the support structure to consistently deliver.
So he wasn't a failure in terms of ability. He was let down by the logistics, by being maybe too far ahead of his time.
Precisely. He was one of the very first Japanese horses to even get into those top European races regularly. Years before the world really started taking Japanese racing seriously on a global stage, the fact he endured 2 years of that pressure, that grind, and came back to Japan physically sound, that's the real measure of his courage.
So he returns home autumn 1987. He's 6 years old now, probably rusty, definitely battle-hardened. And he walks back into a Japanese racing scene that's completely changed. There are new superstars.
Absolutely. Oguri Cap was emerging, Super Creek, Bamboo Memory.
Yeah.
A whole new generation was taking over. He was the old warrior returning.
And did he settle back in quietly, knowing his temperament?
Not exactly. That defiant streak came roaring back. This leads to probably the most famous or infamous story of his later career, the 1988 Meinichi Yokan.
Ah, the legend of the kick. Tell us what happened.
He was pure chaos. In the paddock, before the race even started, Sirius Symboli just lost it. Maybe the crowds, the pressure, being back in that environment. He started violently kicking out at the horses near him.
Seriously, in the parade ring?
Yes, aggressively. He connected with 2 other big-name horses. Legend Tio was hit so badly, he had to be withdrawn from the race on the spot.
Wow, imagine the scenes. A former Derby winner attacking the field before the race.
Pandemonium. The other horse he kicked, Dinah Actress, a top mare, somehow escaped serious injury, but it was just wild. Disrupted everything, could have jeopardized the whole race.
Classic Sirius Symboli, though.
Unpredictable.
Volatile.
But then, despite all that drama, despite being 6, despite the 2 years away, he goes out and runs an absolute blinder.
As you win?
Not quite. He charges home, finishes a really strong second, right behind the new megastar, Oguri Cap.
Incredible. So that fire, that talent, it was still there even wrapped in all that chaos.
It summed him up perfectly, that race. Brilliant ability, but always on his own terms, always capable of the unexpected.
His career started to wind down after that, though.
Yeah, he raced a few more times, didn't find the winner's circle again. His last significant run was 7th, Tenno Show Autumn. Then they found a fracture, and that was it. Retirement.
And, you know, the sad part statistically is that because he spent his prime years, age 4 and 5, battling in Europe.
He never really got those big showdowns with his own generation back home. Symboli Rudolf, Mio Shinzan. Those defining clashes never happened. Leaves a bit of a what if.
So what happened after racing? A quiet retirement.
Relatively quiet. He went to stud, had modest success, didn't produce another star like himself. He was retired from breeding duties around 1997, lived out his days peacefully, passed away in 2012. He lived to be 30, which is a remarkable age for a thoroughbred.
A long life. So looking back at everything, the Derby win, the European exile, the 0 wins there, the kick, the comeback, what's the final verdict? What's his legacy?
His legacy isn't in the win column internationally. It's as the prototype, the pioneer who paid the price. His struggle, those 14 losses in Europe, that isolation, it was the most valuable, if painful, lesson for the entire Japanese racing world. Because the JRA, the racing authorities, they saw it. They saw the logistical nightmare, the lack of support, the acclimatization issues, the health challenges. They learned the hard way, through him, that you can't just send a horse and hope. Ambition needs infrastructure, serious infrastructure.
So he basically failed so that others could succeed later.
You could absolutely say that. All the amazing support systems you see now for Japanese horses traveling abroad, for El Condor Pasa, for Orfevre, Kizuna, Deep Bond, all those great international campaigners, that foundation was built because they knew they couldn't repeat the Sirius Symboli experience.
He was the bridge then. between Japan being a powerful domestic racing nation and becoming a true global force.
That's the perfect way to put it. He was the bridge. He walked that incredibly difficult path first.
So yeah, the race record overseas, 0 wins. It doesn't look impressive on paper, but those numbers just can't capture the sheer guts it must have taken. 2 years alone, fighting the best, no safety net.
He paid the price so others wouldn't have to bear that same burden of isolation.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how we define failure versus pioneering. Sometimes the biggest contribution isn't winning, it's just blazing the trail, even if you stumble. Showing it can be attempted. His legacy isn't the wins he didn't get, it's the unbelievable courage it took to even try to stand alone like that.
Absolutely. He set a standard for sheer toughness. And the fact he came back, 6 years old, still competitive enough to challenge a gory cap after everything. It proved the Japanese spirit that ambition wasn't going to be easily extinguished.
He forced the world to eventually take notice, something to definitely think about next time you see a horse embark on one of those ambitious international campaigns.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.